All right, Chris, here we go with the weekend before the weekend before. It is almost Selection Sunday. Always good to have you as part of our coverage on college basketball coast to coast. We love it. The information is constantly coming in on who's winning, who's losing, all the games, conference tournaments underway, regular seasons ending in the power conferences, at least anyway, for this weekend. Good to be back. We're pumped for all of this. You've got a brand new bracket release out, updated information, and we're ready for the weekend. And then it gets really crazy from here on out, headed to Selection Sunday, right?
Yeah, even though, Monday and Tuesday, are a little bit lighter once Wednesday gets here. And honestly, to me, when the Wednesday through Friday window is even better than the Thursday and Friday of the first round, in my opinion. I think that those are really the three best days of the year.
That's saying something though, because I love the Thursday and the Friday like everybody else, but
Yeah.
there's so many more games as well, voluminous
Yes.
games and games that matter. Okay, so a couple of topics that come to mind immediately for me. Give me a team or two that has really helped themselves over the last 6, 7 days. Full disclosure, you and I are doing this on Friday on the 6th, headed into the weekend. So if you're seeing us after the fact on Saturday, you may have known that somebody else really helped themselves on Friday night, etc. Chris and I don't know that. But as of right now, since like going into last weekend, give me a team or two that's really helped themselves in your mind and in your latest bracketology release for bloggingthebracket.com.
I think the biggest one is TCU just because of the fact that they went to Lubbock and won. And I mean, you're not going to get very many better results than that. And this is, again, remember a team that's already a team that has beaten Florida on a neutral floor. So that's, a possible one seed and a team that's sitting between the 3 and 4 lines right now. They've won, bookending their season almost. So that's one team that I really think did a great job. The other team is Miami by beating SMU, who's kind of fallen down the seed list with several losses over the past few weeks. Miami trying to separate themselves from kind of a really strong middle class. I think that North Carolina is kind of third behind Duke and Virginia in the ACC. North Carolina, I think if with a win over Duke on Saturday, he's probably going to end up as a top 4 seed. But Miami is trying to get on that 5 or 6 line, and they need to beat teams like SMU and Louisville coming up on Saturday, and they're halfway there. So that's another team that I think you want to kind of keep an eye on.
Again, that SMU game with Miami, I know you have SMU right now out of your field in the latest
No, oh,
release.
oh, last four in, last four
Last
in.
four in, my mistake.
Yeah,
Last four in, right on the line here. They
yeah.
could have used that one. They do
Oh,
have a
yes.
couple of other wins, and it's just odd to still contemplate. This is their second year in the ACC. They're in the middle of the state of Texas, away from all of it. Yet they've got to be scoreboard watching for a lot of the games in the Eastern time zone here as part of this weekend unfolding, and then try to do damage themselves when they make their way to Charlotte to the tournament.
Yeah, and they don't have an easy game on Saturday because they have to go to Florida State. And Florida State has gotten themselves back into contention. They're one of those teams that's making a late run. Their net's up to 74. So they're almost kind of in range. They're 2 games over 500. There'll be 3 games over 500. They could beat SMU. Oklahoma's another team that's kind of in that same ballpark. And those are the teams that are competing with your Auburns and your Indianas. So the picture has really kind of gotten a little more muddled just because, some teams are gelling at just the right time.
I'm still looking at your list. Excuse me. I'll pick it back up. I'm looking at your list, and you still have Auburn in at the moment with all of those losses.
Yeah.
Where do you come down? Because a lot of times the committee will say, just as a blanket statement, what we talked about this before. Once you get to the 13th game that you've lost, the 14th game that you've lost, that's probably it. How do you have Auburn at the moment overcoming that many losses, and why?
It's the quality wins. And I think I said this last time is that, the committee loves nothing more than taking an SEC team that is 17 and 15, 17 and or 18 and 14, just kind of just on that cusp over 500, but they have, 2, 3, 4 wins like Auburn does, which of course, 2 of those wins are, like I said, are in that top category, that quad 1A. And that's something that a lot of teams, on the bubble are not going to be able, to kind of replicate on their own profiles. And then all of their strength of schedule numbers are 3, 4, 4, and 17. So they played a tough schedule, and that's another thing the committee really likes.
Auburn again plays Alabama at Alabama. Alabama won the first matchup, so here's another chance to prove yourself. If they don't win that game, they're 16 and 15. I'm
15.
going on the record with Mr. bloggingthebracket.com. Just hypothetically, that game is a Saturday night game. If Auburn loses that game, are they more than likely out in your next bracket reveal, or would you still more than likely have them there? You would have them out?
Oh, no, I would have them out. Yes,
Okay,
they're
so
gonna. They were gonna have to do a lot of work in Nashville if they lose that game tomorrow.
All right, they need
on
it.
Saturday.
They need it on Saturday night with Alabama in that instance. All right, Indiana is also there. Indiana in your last four in. Indiana and Ohio State play in the regular season finale for both on Saturday. Give me the rationale between both of them. Why is Indiana in at the moment in your latest reveal here on the last four in? And obviously, Ohio State's had a lot of opportunities, just like we're talking about with Auburn. Ohio State's had a lot of opportunities to be able. You have them safely in, by the way, the last four buys. What about this matchup? Go ahead.
This is the big thing that works in Indiana's favor is they don't have any bad losses, and they have a top 10 win, a good road win over UCLA. That Wisconsin win is going to be top 30 soon, probably, which is going to be another quad one win for them as long as they don't lose, to Ohio State, on Saturday, which is very, very possible, I think. Their strength of schedule, non-conference is not so good, but they played a pretty tough schedule in the Big Ten, which helps. As for Ohio State, they're in better shape just because top 10 win over Purdue. Purdue was kind of, benefiting everybody in the Big Ten at this point between Indiana, Ohio State, UCLA. And then you look at Ohio State's wins outside of quad one, and they have a whole lot of tie-breaking wins over teams like Wisconsin, UCLA, West Virginia, USC. They've beaten kind of the teams they're going to be most directly compared against, and they have no bad losses. So at this point, the metrics really like Ohio State, especially the predictive ones. And that's one big reason why they're there. And one reason they're ahead of Indiana is their road neutral record isn't great at 6-8, but it's a lot better than Indiana's at 4-8. They've got a couple more road wins that really kind of boost their case over what the Hoosiers have right now.
Love the insight here from Chris Dobbertean with me for a few more moments. So stay tuned because somebody's got to win that game, Indiana and Ohio State. And then your last chance would be on the neutral floor in Chicago. And I could totally see the argument being made for Indiana with the late season loss to Michigan State. They also lost to USC in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago. If they don't win the Ohio State game and they don't win an opening game in the Big Ten tournament, a lot of times, Chris, we talk about this. That's where the committee will point to it at the end of the year and say, you had opportunities to show us something and you did the opposite. You lost games, you lost your way out, you excluded yourself, basically.
And this is the problem with the Big Ten expanding to include everybody this year, because the bottom half of the Big Ten is not great. So there are going to be a whole lot of opportunities for these bubble teams if they don't take care of business during their first game in Chicago. They're going to be in real trouble because they're picking up the dreaded bad late loss on a neutral floor, and you can't do that.
Yeah, can't do it there in Chicago. Okay, Miami of Ohio. Again, we do this in the preview mode on Friday. If they are hearing us, seeing this video Saturday and beyond, obviously, we don't know what happened. They're playing at Ohio. They have previously beaten Ohio in a game where they scored 90 points about a month ago. They are favored. If they get it, if it is the first regular season unbeaten year for a team since Gonzaga 2021. That one was a little goofy for a lot of reasons. There were numerous Gonzaga games that year canceled because of COVID-19. So they didn't play as many games. I believe, Chris, they had 5 or 6 games that were canceled. They beat a bevy of top 20 programs, though, out of the conference, like 4 of them. And then they dominated, obviously, in the WCC that had a couple of good teams. Okay, so now that I've laid that groundwork, They are going for an unbeaten season. They are still an at-large case at the moment because they haven't won the automatic bid. How much is the at-large case bolstered if they finish this off before they ever get to Cleveland in the MAC tournament? What do you say?
They have to win this game, and it's going to be very difficult for them because there's one thing that Miami does not do, and that is win in Athens. They last won on the home floor of the Bobcats in 2011, and these are arch rivals. They play twice a year. Every year they play twice a year. They have not won there in 15 years. If they can pull it off tonight, just because of that, yeah, and I'm thinking back to the last couple of games I've watched where they really were able to just kind of pull out some miracle shots. I think it really becomes kind of a team of destiny thing at that point. But metrically, the thing that really works against them is now, earlier this week, they were only behind South Florida in terms of the auto bids. South Florida would have been I slotted South Florida as at 11, Miami's at 12 because their metrics are just that much better. Now it's both South Florida and Belmont are ahead of them. So their large chances are really kind of being crushed here by the numbers. And I think that's why if they lose tonight, they are going to be in very, very deep trouble and will have to win in Cleveland. And, they're going to have to break some history and reverse some historical trends to actually do that.
We should point out that I believe it is in their last seven games, they have won 4 of them by 4 points or less. They have lived on the edge, the Miami of Ohio Redhawks. They were down a week ago on Friday night at Western Michigan in the final minute of the game by a bucket and had to come back and win it. So they
miracle shots
dangerously,
again.
Chris. Yes.
Yeah, and the living dangerously part is why all of all their predictive numbers are hanging out in the 80 to 90 range, which is where you do not want to be on your selection sheet. You want those numbers to be as high as possible. You want them to be, if you're an at-large candidate, at least in the 40s and 50s, and that is not going to do it.
I keep saying if this, and again, Ohio, just to break this down, and you may be listening tomorrow and know that Miami of Ohio won the game by 10. You may be listening to us late Friday night, Saturday, seeing us on YouTube, and you're going, guys, they won. We don't know that while we're doing the show. We don't know that. But I'm going to reiterate something I've seen said a couple of other places. If they lose this game, and Ohio is in the 200s, by the way, in the net. If they lose this game, they have to win the tournament. Just exactly what you just referenced and what you kind of led up to. Because now you will have a reason to exclude them if there are 2 late losses. And that committee, I believe, will justify it by saying you lost late twice. You played a schedule that was 331 in America, 5th worst schedule in the country. You lost twice late. Don't give them the ammo. Don't give them the. I think it's stronger. One more follow-up. It's stronger next week if they have finished the regular season undefeated and they've won the opening game. The pressure will be massive on the committee at that point of, are you seriously going to eradicate the whole season and the end of the season because of one loss at the very end? 2 losses is much more palatable and justifiable. What about that point if we get to next week and they have the unbeaten year under that scenario?
And yes, I agree. And especially I think if they get to the final and they play Akron, which again was the final last year, kind of the reverse situation. And Akron is a really good team. They're 56th in the net, and they only won that game in Oxford by 3 points back in January. If they, lose by 3 points in Cleveland, I think, especially on that Saturday night, make it to the final. I don't think at that point, they'd be 32-1. Of 29-1 against D1, at that point, I think you have to at least send them to Dayton and play that extra game and get them in the field.
And again, you're dealing with human beings and a subjective process and a vote and the story. It's not just a computer spitting it out. Yeah. Stay tuned. Anything else that I did not cover as we head to the final regular season weekend for the power conferences and some of the mid-majors and conference tournament play this week? You got an eyeball or 2. Automatic bids are going out Saturday and Sunday. Got an eyeball or 2, an eyeball or 10 on some things. What do you got?
I think the regular season closes out with a really huge game between Michigan and Michigan State in Ann Arbor. they might very well play in that exact, roughly that same time slot, 1 week later and before Selection Sunday for the championship of the Big Ten. So that's one to keep an eye on. I think I would be very careful if I were Florida going to Kentucky, especially since they still do play better at home. Look what they did to Vanderbilt last week. If you want to stay as a 1 seed candidate, you can't lose to Kentucky if you're the Gators. I think that in terms of conference tournaments, keep an eye on the Valley just because Arch Madness, always crazy things happens there.
Say this, please. Belmont does not have an at-large case, really. It's kind of the same thing as Miami of Ohio. Elaborate. If they somehow don't end up with the automatic bid Sunday, what about Belmont out of Nashville, Tennessee?
Yeah, Belmont does not have anything resembling an at-large case, even with a record that's 25-5 against Division I. They only played one non-D1 game. They didn't play any quad one games. Again, I think that's a function of, not being able to schedule necessarily. All of their quad two games, except for one, were in conference, and they're 5-2 in those games. Their best win by net was at Northern Iowa, who's 84th. So they're probably not going to have. They're not going to have that large chance based on that profile. And the other thing to kind of keep in mind that's going to be very fascinating is that they move the Arch Madness final tip time up to 11 a.m. Central, but they're still playing the semifinals starting at 2:30 Central and, wrapping up around probably 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock Central. So there's going to be a very quick turnaround in that game. So that's something to be very mindful of on Sunday.
Who has a tough semifinal is what you're saying too. Who has a tough battle and less rest, and especially in the second game, could matter on that. One more time, I will say it. Last four buys on the Blogging the Bracket. Latest release on Friday is Ohio State, Missouri, TCU, Texas. Last four in, you have Santa Clara, SMU, Auburn, and Indiana, subject to change. Auburn playing Alabama, Indiana playing Ohio State. Can they hang on to their spot? SMU.
Santa Clara, the thing with the WCC in that stepladder bracket is, they only play that quarterfinal game on Sunday, and then they would immediately, if they win that, have to play St. Mary's again.
Yep.
So that's going to be fascinating to see what the Broncos do.
All right, so Santa Clara, SMU, Auburn, Indiana, your last four in. Your first four out headed to the weekend are Virginia Tech, New Mexico, VCU, San Diego State. This will be updated. This will change. Get ready. It will be updated and it will change over the course of the next few days. So go to bloggingthebracket.com for the latest reveal. Chris, enjoy the games. Thank you for the insight here on the Friday before this weekend gets underway.
Yeah.
I appreciate it as always here on College Basketball Coast to Coast.
I'm glad to do it. Thanks, TJ.